Hello, and welcome to the Peaceful Empowerment Work Show. We are live on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. I am your co-host, Judy Forder, and I am here with my partner in peace, Miss
Kris Burke. Hi, everybody.
Before we get started, if you would like to support us in spreading the message that peace is the word, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Today's topic, finding peace with money. Letting old patterns go so abundance can flow.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. You should know. We'll have to disclose because we're trying to scramble to get ourselves into alignment here because essentially we were just metaphorically racing across the back lot of the studio to get to the right set.
Absolutely.
So here we are, and we're here now. So let's just, and we're so excited to be with you today. And thank you for waiting that few minutes while we all got into the right place. Our producer almost got blown away by a hurricane yesterday, so things were a little scrambly here.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I had a friend that used to say, "You're in the right church, you're sitting in the wrong pew." That's how I felt. I was like, "Oh my gosh."
Exactly. Yeah. So money, it's funny. We don't have a lot of light topics.
Well, this work is real, so.
This work is real. Yeah. And money, boy, it's a tricky one. Because it's just so interfaces everywhere you turn in society. The beliefs about money, the beliefs about our worth and how much money we do or do not have or do not earn says about us. And because it's reinforced just everywhere, it can be really tricky to do exactly what Judy and I are always, working on and sharing with you about using peaceful empowerment to separate yourself, what's true about you, from what's out there in your family or your culture or, anywhere else that suggests that your worth or that your identity is somehow permanently attached to something that actually can completely change.
Yeah. Yes. And I have to say, when I first took Own Your Experience, the live class that we do, my focus was my relationship with money.
Mm-hmm.
For that very reason. I was a teacher for 24 years, and anybody who's in the teaching field knows you don't get into it for the money. So there was that, and things were fine. I had a consistent paycheck, but to say things were affluent as societal standards would put them, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up in a family that lived paycheck to paycheck, so I was repeating that pattern, and my worth was very much based in how much I had in the bank.
Right.
And when I left the stability of teaching to launch into, energy healing and being an energy practitioner and intuitive counselor, that's why everybody around me was like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
And they based my success. Whenever I would talk about something good that was going on, blah, 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 it would always be, "Well, how much money are you making?"
Right.
Which would just knock me
Yeah.
down even more.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Judy shared with me the other day something about her helping somebody who is physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, just in a really hard place. And Judy took such light and grace and beauty into that situation. When she was sharing that with me, I thought about, because we've been talking about the show and we were talking about it actually during that hour. And I started thinking about how we'll keep comparing ourselves and judging ourselves, right? Because that's what it is. We'll judge ourselves and our own self-worth based on what we earn. And yet we're so willing to dismiss the joy and the love and the light and the healing that we take to people. Like, oh yeah, that person was going to kill themselves. And I'm, those of us who are in the healing space, therapists, whatever, healers, we know that that's part of the work. It's that people get to the place where they really don't want to be here anymore, or they're not sure that they want to be here anymore. And we step forward and help them to find themselves, to find the truth of their own beauty and their own value. And it's funny that we live in a society where we'll so quickly be like, oh, yeah, well, I helped 5 people this week or 5 people today, but I didn't make a lot of money. So I guess I'm not worth much.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes, and that's exactly what would happen.
Yes. Yes, that is the world that we live in. And it's reinforced everywhere you go. And if you feel like you need to defend yourself, which is part of what happens, is that if you find yourself in a situation where somebody's like, well, I don't know, you didn't make much money, so what are you doing this for? It's really tempting to want to defend and even use what I just said. But to do that is actually to give away our worth. It's to agree that we don't have worth and that we need defending. Right. So part of what we're learning here together is how to stay in your own skin and to know your own worth. Feel it inherently. Have absolute faith and confidence in your own worth so that if other people have issues about your worth, that can be their problem.
Yes, and it's like I can hear the collective brains out there being like, but hey, you need money to live.
Hmm.
And yes, in this 3D world, I was very much that same way. But it helped me realize that every decision I made was based in money.
Hmm.
So here I was doing this work thinking I was setting myself free, but I was still a prisoner to the dollar,
Yeah.
and it was funny because we were about halfway through the class and I had this revelation and I come to class and I declare that, money's not the boss of me anymore.
I remember that very well.
I'm going to make decisions based on how they feel in my heart because
Hmm.
I denied myself a lot of joy. I don't need to spend a lot of money to experience joy, but I put a dollar sign to everything.
Yeah.
And because the dollars weren't there, I wasn't allowing myself to experience happiness and joy at a level that I rightfully should.
Yeah.
And when I
Yeah.
realized it was tied to the money and I was able to let that connection go, I mean, everything just seemed to open up.
Hmm.
And it made me view money as a whole different, I'll say monster, because that's how I saw it before.
Right.
I saw money was, that thing that kept me from being who I was supposed to be and getting what I was supposed to have and living the life. It was all money. I've done everything else. It's down to the money. And
Right.
that was so not true.
Right.
It wasn't true at all.
Yeah.
And, it's not to say that my bank account is overflowing, but I've opened myself up to realizing that money is a part of the how, not the end goal.
That's
These,
right.
work that I do is the work that makes my heart sing and it
Hmm.
brings me joy and it lights me up. And I'm trusting that the universe will provide. I don't know how many times I've said that over the past 8, 9 years,
Right.
but 9 months ago, 10 months ago, I started to believe it and
Hmm.
showing up. It's
Yes.
definitely showing up in ways, we say abundance. And immediately that battlefield mind goes to money.
Mm.
But abundance is everything. It's not just finances. And when you open up to the many ways that, you can receive, it's amazing how it shows up.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you really open your heart, when your heart is singing because you're doing what you love with people that you trust and respect, who are kind to you, then your heart really does start to sing and it becomes easy to open your heart up to the possibilities. And it's amazing how many ways life will offer to support us if we can receive, you
Yeah.
know. money is one of the ways. I mean, money in your own bank account is one of the ways, but I have a great example. I needed a hay barn so that I wouldn't have to run and get hay all the time. In the winter, I had enough to, keep a couple of weeks worth, but I couldn't just stock up the barn and be done with it for the winter. So it was a lot of extra effort. And it would be so wonderful. And then I said, well, I can't afford it now, but I'm going to put it out there into the universe on the wish list. And I'm sure in good time it will come. And the next thing I know, my mom is offering um, to support me in having a hay barn without unsolicited, without me asking. And to be able to say, wow, this is the universe's gift to me. This is God's gift to me, however people think about that, or that resonates with you. And my mom was a central part of that, right? But if I had issues, which there was a time I would have, if I had issues about receiving that because I would have expected there were strings attached, or because I would have been ashamed, I should be able to do this for myself, or, whatever the things were. But instead, I was able to be grateful that we were able to do this together. And the sign that's going on the building says the oasis that love built. And it's absolutely 100% true. When I told my mom that, her eyes got teary. It really landed with her. So when we don't allow ourselves, when we don't allow the opportunity for, what we need to come through lots of different ways, then we deny ourselves the ability to receive, and we deny the people that care about us and that we care about us the ability to give. Because giving to someone who receives with an open heart is a beautiful experience.
And we're two people that enjoy giving,
Yeah,
which
we do.
always makes me, we always have. We've always, and I know every client I sit in front of, almost every client is the giver, 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 giver. And when it comes to receiving, it's like,
Yeah.
you know. So this plays out with money too, because everything is vibration. And it
Mhm.
was interesting when Kris and I were planning for the show, she has a whole different perspective. She's played both ends of the money spectrum
Mhm.
and was able to bring forward some things that I didn't even think about when we were talking about, what are some of the ways money serves us and what are some of the ways that money doesn't serve us, not having it and having it.
Right.
So you were able to shed light on what it was like to have the money.
Yeah, many years ago when my kids were little, um, and they're now in their 30s. So when they were young, and I was young, I had a business, and we did. I had earned an MBA, and a few years later, I started a business, and we made $1 million in our first year in that business, which had been a goal of mine to make $1 million before my 30th birthday. And I did that, but I also got caught up in being responsible for all of these employees and all of these clients, plus, raising my children and running a household. And it was completely overwhelming because I didn't know how to, I wasn't a teacher, I was a doer. Right. So I hadn't stepped into my energy. I wasn't really a leader yet. And so I only knew how to do, and I could teach people how to do things, but I didn't know how to empower people. So you might underscore the name of our show here. And what I found is until you learn how to empower people in a genuinely peaceful way, then you end up running around doing everything, feeling resentful that you're exhausted and, worn out all the time. And it seems that other people aren't carrying their weight, and it's really only because they can't get inside your head. And you haven't yet learned how to share what's inside your head in a way that they can receive it and act on it. Right. So it isn't anybody's flawed. It's just that in order to step up into that next level of leadership from doership, we really do need to be able to share the information in an actionable way, and then provide that guidance and support for people to use it. Um, so I had some trauma about being overwhelmed by that. And somewhere in my subconscious, I had a belief like, no, it's better to just not get so big financially, because when you do, all of a sudden there's just more to manage, right? You have more projects going on at home because you can afford them. So you're like, sure, we'll redo this and we'll redo that and we'll have people doing the grounds and the housekeeping. And, it seemed like there were just so many plates spinning. And when I shut all of that down, I didn't realize that I was carrying a little, trunk of trauma around don't get so big financially because everything spins out of control. And I had to remind myself that that version of me, that zone 2 version of me has grown. Zone 3 version of me can stay present and make choices, and remain in peace even when there are a lot of people involved, because I'm able to communicate and to listen to my inner guidance.
Yes. I'm sorry, that visual of the trauma of trunk. I mean, the trunk trauma. I love it. I love it.
It's like an Ebenezer Scrooge kind of thing, because I just picture myself carrying it with the chains, like, oh, must not have money again.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's gonna resurface somewhere, I'm sure.
They usually do.
So, yes, exactly. So, it was very interesting for me because in my mind, for somebody to be in zone 1 concerning money, it meant they didn't have enough.
Right.
They were always lacking. Whereas our conversation, again, opened it up to me that you can have all the money in the world and still be in zone 1.
I know lots of people who do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what we do on the show is we go through the map. So, is this a perfect opportunity for us to work our way through the map, Kris, and show them zone 1, 2, 3, and 4s?
Why, Judy? I believe it is. And look at that, the magic map.
Poof.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so let's go into zone 1. Let's talk about what was your money experience in zone 1, Judy?
A lot of mine was based in um, regret
Mhm.
because in my teaching years, I also worked other jobs. During the summer, I would always work 2 jobs. So I had money, but it was going out as quickly as it was coming in.
Mhm.
So I get to a point where I would look back and be like, "Ugh,
Right.
did I have a good time?" Now, I will say this: I did have a good time spending the money that I spent.
Sure.
But came time for me to be a grown up, I'll say, it was
Mhm.
like, I've worked all these years and I have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
And I also, coming to me right now, that is a conditioned belief.
Right.
I've worked all these years and have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
Nothing. Teacher, I was a coach. I worked with children. I worked with kids. I worked with teenagers that are, I helped support them in their desire to grow and evolve. But because I didn't have enough money in my savings account, that is what I told myself. I've
Mhm.
worked all these years and I have nothing to show for it.
Yes.
So there was a lot of shame, humiliation, blaming myself, you know,
Yeah.
all of those zone 1 feelings,
Yeah.
hopelessness, I'm never going to get out of this hole, all of those things, felt them all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I had a lot of that in zone 1 as well. I had a lot of the money things early on before I went into business and started making some money. I had a lot of, I can't have what I want, right?
Mhm.
I always have to make do with what I can afford. So whenever it was, do I want something or do I need something? My first thought was always, what does it cost?
Mhm.
And that's a very zone 1 situation, because, you find out later when we run over to zone 3 that actually you can decide exactly what it is that you want. And then you can set that. And then if you can practice a little patience and a little intention, that opportunity, that pathway will come along if it's still important enough to you. Right. But when we in zone 1, what we're doing is effectively closing the door on what we really want and saying, well, I can't have what I really want. So what can I get instead?
Yes, absolutely. And we'll take just if you're watching or if you're listening, remember you can go to get your map at www.masterfulu.com/get-your-map so that you can have your own map and work through this with us. Now, I
Yay.
know that fear, like I said, when I decided I wanted to be a grown up, fear of not being able to buy the house that society says you need to grow up and buy and do all the things that society was saying on that timeline I should be doing. Fear set in, and I was getting very anxious about these benchmarks, landmarks that I wasn't going to be able to meet. And
Right.
then that threw me right into anger.
Yes.
Anger and then pride, because if someone did come forward offering a hand, it was like, no, 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 everything's good. And the world thought everything was fine.
Hmm.
But yeah, I kept it all tight to the chest.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm getting right now to just share 50,000 people a year in America commit suicide. The average person is average adult here in America is carrying 40 to $50,000 in debt, right? So money is a challenge. It's playing a big role in our misery.
Mhm.
Um, and so this is an important thing to learn about how we can reshape the way we think about money and we think about ourselves so that we can break past those limits and be free to have what we need. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this just in. So every once in a while the inspiration comes in. It's like, you need to say this now. Okay. So that was a little out of position, but
No, I think it was perfect because money is a huge stressor.
mhm,
And I know in my life, chalked everything up to a lot of my stress up to not having enough of it.
right.
Whereas when I dug through and released that patterning, that old conditioning and patterns with the money, I was able to unleash some other things that were under there causing me stress that had to do with a lot of judgment in relationship to money, but it
Right.
was still there.
Yeah.
When I shifted and said money's not the boss of me, then there was judgment. So I had to work on the judgment of all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you said that, it reminded me that if you look at zone two, it's a maze, right? And everybody's trying to get to the castle and win the flag or capture the flag or, whatever the thing is. So, and we're kind of trying to figure out what this game is. But if you notice in our Own Your Interactions class, we focus on this a little bit. Everybody's got their own money game that they're playing. Right. So in zone one, most people are just playing the there's never enough game. And that looks like a lot of different things. But the basic game is there's never enough for me. And so how do I make do with the fact that I can't ever have enough? In zone two, people tend to be getting what they need, but they're playing games to do it. They've got mental games going on. They're playing games with other people. They've set up strategies, lots of rules about, I always do this with my money. I never do that. Um, and different ways that they're trying to define and set up kind of structures to make sure that the money comes to them. Because in zone two, the intellect is trying to figure out how to run the world, not yet knowing that we've got access to zone three and zone four that actually just connect us to a higher intelligence, and give us a lot more like innate skill and the ability to attract what we need, as opposed to trying to make it happen on our own as if we're alone in a maze, right?
And when you said make it happen, that's conflict.
Yes,
It's when we're making things happen, when there's conflict, there is no peace.
that is, oh, that is so true. Absolutely. Like underscore and highlight that. That is so true. When you're trying to make something happen, what you're saying is the world isn't working for me. It's broken. The world is broken and I'm going to fix it. right? This is actually what the intellect says. You might recognize the intellect sometimes gets referred to as the ego out there in the world, right?
Mm,
So it's like, this world doesn't work for me the way it is. I'm going to fix it. And when we get into zone three, we find out that the ego, it means well. Um, and it's just doesn't understand a lot of how the world works, doesn't understand how interconnected we can be, and how, if we get really clear with our hearts and our heads and get them into alignment, things start happening, it seems as if on their own,
mhm.
right? We're experiencing that now. Things are shifting and happening so quickly, with this organization and all of the things that we're doing, and it's not because we are making it happen, it's because we keep asking, okay, what's next?
Mhm. Yes, and that was a big shift as well. Trusting just to ask what's next because, we get in that position where we think ego allows us to think we know everything.
Uh-huh.
We have all the information we have all the information and now we can make these decisions and we can create this plan and blah 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 blah. All that's based on past experience.
Right.
Zone 3 is where intuition, where I really started to realize I don't have all the information. I don't know everything. So in my mind, I am totally unqualified to
Right.
try to manipulate the world and make it work for me.
Yeah.
So that whole, okay, just show me what's the next right step for me. That's
Yeah.
what I've been doing. And like Kris said, things are falling in place and things are aligning and things are happening. Things that I never dreamed could happen. Doors are opening. And it's so amazing to me
Mhm.
that because there's a part of me, ego's like, you're lazy. You're just sitting around doing nothing. You got to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. And the doing that we do, um, is so it's just different, right? It's internally focused. It's focused on, am I in alignment? Am I being honest with myself? Am I clear? Are my head and heart in agreement?
Mhm.
Am I allowing, or am I just telling myself that I'm allowing? Right? Because it's very easy to trick ourselves, into thinking that, yeah, I'm doing all of the things that I need to do to get myself into that place of peace, when actually we're just saying it so that we don't have to deal with it,
Mhm.
right? We've all been through that phase.
Oh,
Yeah. I mean, it comes back, and you're like, darn, I thought I went through this. And what does this have to do with money, you might wonder?
everything.
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 Absolutely everything. Because our worth and our expectations, what we value, what we focus on, the intentions that we set, the energy that we live in. What is it that do we really believe? Do we know in our heart and soul that the universe is working to deliver what it is that you value, what it is that you love and brings you joy? And if you can trust that and be receptive to that and be flexible, because it requires growth. It does require growth. The person that has all of the money she needs or he needs to do whatever, is intended, whatever your heart intends in the world, that person is different energetically than the person who starts out saying, I don't have.
Mhm.
It's an energetic shift. It's not a personality shift. It's not a being shift. It's an energetic shift. Our vibration changes. We think about things differently. We feel differently, and then consequently, we behave differently, and we behave in ways that are in alignment with good things happening for us and to us.
Yes, and what we discussed, one of the big things we discussed, I don't remember how long ago this was now, but we were talking about battlefield and oasis and money and how the belief in the battlefield is money comes first. And
Right.
that's always been a conflict for you and I.
Ah,
And sure, anybody out there that's trying to get their heart's purpose out for the world to hear and receive, you feel very much the same way. So that's a conflict
mhm.
because social norms are saying that money is the number one thing,
Right.
and we're saying, but shouldn't people be the number one thing? So where's this conflict? And then when you sit with someone who feels the same way, it's like, okay, so I'm not crazy.
Right.
It's okay for me to declare that I value people over money.
Mhm.
And since you and I had that conversation, everything has shifted tremendously as well.
Yeah. In fact,
That's all improvement.
yeah, I was just going to say there's a challenge for people. There's a hint for people. If you're struggling with wanting to be in service in some way and you're wondering how you're going to get compensated for this, just declare to yourself and the universe that you put people first and you're going to trust that in doing that, that what you need is going to come. Stop trying to choose between people and profits because then you'll just spin around in a loop because all of you isn't anywhere. You're split, you're divided. Put all of your energy into, I'm going to serve the very best way that I can. And I'm going to trust that, frankly, the universe maintains balance,
Yes, and the
right?
battlefield taught us that it was an either or.
Right.
It's not an either or. You
Mm-mm.
can serve in the best way your heart wants you to and prosper.
Yeah. In
You can
fact,
have both.
yes. In fact, the more that you get into alignment with your heart, the more with your heart you really are. Like, I'm all in. Let's do what lights us up and what we love. The more you do that, the more easily it all flows.
Yes. And
Yeah.
and we speak from experience.
Yes.
We
Yes.
speak from experience. We want to, we are all about experiential learning. Why is that? Because we've experienced it and now we want to share it so that you all can learn too.
Yeah. And it's funny because people, you might not know this now, but not so many years ago, a handful of years ago, or maybe even less, maybe 3 years ago, Judy and I still, we, the things that we've been sharing with you today, we'd heard snippets of it. We got some of it intuitively. We got it through inspiration. It was like, yeah, yeah, it sounds really nice. It sounds really nice. But we're both pretty skeptical
Mhm.
people. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that we work so well together is because we're both skeptical and we would freely say, like, I want to believe it, but it kind of sounds like, bullshit.
A pipe dream. Put your unicorns and rainbows away.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it sounds great, but what if it's just BS?
Mhm.
And how would we know? And so we can tell you at this time and don't expect you to just all of a sudden magically ding, like take that as any more holy than we were able to when we heard it at different times either. But it's another piece in your puzzle, right? It's another bit of evidence. Like, we have been in that place where we thought, yeah, it sounds nice, but my experience is that the harder I try, the more stuck I get, right? And that is true right up until that point when you really decide, I'm going to do what I know is right and I'm not going to worry about the rest of it because you know what? We don't have control over it anyway.
Mm. No, and all the times we thought we did, it was an illusion.
Mhm.
It was an illusion.
Yeah, the phone call comes in, right? The minute you let go, I mean, a phone call came in a few days later, and a client I hadn't worked for in a lot of years called and said, "Hey, I need you to do a project." Boom. The second I said people first, it was like I didn't have the door. I wasn't like opening and closing the door to money, opening and closing the door to serve, being in service. It's like I opened both doors and I said,
Mhm.
I'm going through the people door and I'm going to leave this money door open. And the universe was like, fantastic, because we got this little pile here we've been wanting to share with you. It's been hard to get it to you, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
The
that's
universe was like, it's about time.
yeah, yeah. And I get a sense like a lot of the people that listen to us meditate and, spend time kind of in that inner landscape of just knowing what we know and feeling what we feel and kind of understand that there are a lot of dimensions of life happening beyond beyond the physical, what we can see and touch and experience with our five senses. People who haven't been there, I really recommend um, learning or exploring meditation or exploring even, lying someplace or sitting someplace that you're really at peace and just be quiet and ask a question. Just ask a question in your head and just wait for an answer. Right? Like spark up that internal conversation. Ask a question that you don't already know the answer to and see how long it takes for that answer to come to you. Start giving yourself an opportunity to connect with that infinite intelligence that's inside of you and find out what it has in store for you if, just like on the money front, you can open that door. Because that internal communication highway is the same highway, the same door that I'm talking about with the money. It's when we open that connection all the way, what we need is there when we need it because we're not blocking it anymore, because we're asking freely and we're receiving freely, unlike what we were taught to do in the battleground.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, when I was in the battleground in that zone 2 area, I was determined to make the money so that I could prove to all those people that thought I was crazy for leaving my teaching job that I was right.
Right. Oh, yes. Yeah. Been there.
Yep. And when you move to zone 3 and start thinking and allowing yourself to own what has always been in alignment with you, that people are first and blah, blah, blah. Blah. And that's, goes with whatever your line of truth is with money. My truth was people first and the rest can follow.
Mhm.
Um, but with that, it was like all of a sudden, here it comes, Kris. I didn't give a rat's ass what anybody else thought.
Dun-dun-dun.
and, and that set me free.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And since you opened that door, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. When it comes to other people, when it comes to yourself, people, love without condition. One of the things that this map has taught us, and hopefully you're starting to get glimpses of, is that people are multifaceted, complicated, right? And we're different depending upon the zone that we're in. If you take somebody that drives you nuts out of their zone 1 or zone 2 experience and you help them to access their zone 3 or zone 4 selves, right? All of a sudden, you've got a lovely person. When we're interacting with people in zone 1 and zone 2, they drive us crazy because they're struggling, because they've got very limited access to information. And what they do have is, frankly, overwhelmingly scary.
Mhm.
So they're really trying hard to protect themselves. So if we can just see the person and realize they've got all 4 zones in them, and at this moment they happen to be stuck where they are, love them without condition. When they have an opinion to share and it's different than ours, let's respect that opinion because you never know when somebody in zone 1 or zone 2 is handing you a piece of gold straight out of zone 3 or 4.
Mhm.
So respect that opinion, process it, take it through your mind, see if there's some gold in there for you. And if there isn't, fine, leave it. But if there is, take the gold, work it into your thought system, take it into your belief system, accept the gift from whoever is giving it. And
Mhm.
when it comes to judgment and people telling you or you telling you that you're doing something wrong, don't go ahead, Judy, take it away.
Don't give a rat's ass about their.
Boom. Yeah. Don't give a rat's ass about judgment.
Mm-mm. Yours or theirs.
That's right. Because when you're free from that judgment, when you're really free to move through these three categories and separate, there's the person. I'm going to love the person,
Mhm.
right? They're not necessarily choosing to be where they are right now because if they don't know it's a choice and they don't know how to make a different one, they're not really actively choosing,
Mm-mm.
right? So separate the person from their opinions, which may or may not be offering you something brilliant. And the judgment, that's just battleground bullshit. Let it go. And don't attach it to the person. You see um how somebody will say something to you or they'll judge you in some way and suddenly we're like, certainly I had this experience. I don't like this person anymore because they said this thing. They judged me in this way, therefore boom, don't like them anymore. Right? But I can see in this work the person and the judgment are really separate. If we can see that, it frees us up to love ourselves and to love the people wherever we are on the map. And then, boy, the gifts, they just start flowing.
Mhm. Yes, and it doesn't mean, I'm hearing, make this clear. It doesn't mean that because you're sitting in zone 3 observing their behaviors, and if they're judgmental towards you and they say hurtful things, it doesn't mean that you don't feel that emotionally.
Yeah.
It means that you can then separate them from their actions and deal with that emotion that comes up in you and
Mhm.
forgive it and let it go.
Yes. And to be clear, when you do this work, you do eventually get to a point where you do not feel the emotion anymore because
Yeah.
you've cleared it out of your system and it's not there to be felt.
Yeah. Going through
Um,
the process of being aware, being able to see what zones they're in, helps you get to that space where when it's coming at you, you're in that very neutral, receiving, open, loving space
yeah.
where it doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a beautiful thing when somebody can say something hurtful and you can feel compassion for them.
Mhm.
Um, and not, this is not to be a doormat. So it's not like you sit there and have people, beat up on you and you're just like, oh, I'm so zen about this. It's just that your reaction is different because it's not emotional. You don't get triggered. You don't go to zone 1 or 2. You don't say or feel things that you'll later regret or that kind of bury you in further into the emotional mess. Right. And you can stay in that place where you can decide, you can choose consciously what's the right thing to do for me right now. And your intuition will answer.
Perfect.
Right. And always in a way that is kind and respectful to yourself first and to the other person or people.
Yep. That's how you know who's driving your bus, ego or soul.
I love that because I get the image of
Oh, all right. I think it's time to wrap up yet another lovely show.
wow.
So you
Yeah.
can find us at masterfulu.com, www.masterfulu.com. We have 3 levels of engagement um, where you can continue to watch our show every Thursday. We have workshops coming up next month. We'll let you know when that is. And we also have 12-week programs for Own Your Experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And lots of really exciting things coming that we'll tell you about next week.
We do, yes. So
Yeah.
thank you all for joining us. And remember, when it comes to judgment, you don't give a what?
A rat's ass.
All right. We'll see you all next week. Thank you for joining us.
Bye. Thanks, Judy.
Thank